There's one. Nice. Haha, I'm out doing a little early ice crappie fishing here, you guys. And you know, the amount of lures that are available to ice anglers right now is pretty insane, especially for crappie sized baits. And I really wanted to clear up when to use larger search bait type lures versus tungsten jigs, and kind of go over the difference and when I choose to use each type of bait. And we'll also cover spoons in this video, which are kind of an in-between bait in my opinion, between those larger search baits and those finesse triggering baits. So let's get started, let's break it down, and we're going to start with the larger search type baits. I'm going to be talking about lure categories quite a bit in this video, like glide baits, rattle baits, flutter spoons, that sort of thing. If you want more detail about these baits, I've got a video linked below in the description that describes these categories much better. And I'm also going to leave a link for each of my favorite baits in each of these categories below. So check that out, and that'll help you kind of understand where I'm going in this video. So with that said, when do we use larger profile, more aggressive baits for crappies? Well, the first situation is when I'm searching for aggressive crappies and I want to find them on a large weed flat or a basin. I just want to bounce around with my Vexilar, drop a big bait, rip it a few times and see if any crappies come up to it. It's a great way to locate aggressive crappies. Sometimes they'll hit it, sometimes they won't. If they keep hitting it, great, you can keep catching them that way. If not, then at least you found the fish. You can downsize, start catching them on a more neutral bait, and you know that they're at least aggressive enough to shoot up and check out a larger bait. Situation number two is when you've already found the crappies and you've got a really mixed size ratio. A bigger bait will often weed out the larger crappies and you won't have to sort through so many smaller ones. When a crappie gets to a certain size, oftentimes it does switch to more of a bait fish diet. So those more horizontal baits like your rattle baits, your glide baits, they're going to look more like that crappie's food, and the smaller fish are typically eating bugs, so you may be able to weed out some of those smaller fish by using a larger bait. Now, a third time I use these larger profile baits is when I've already found the crappies and they're super aggressive and they're just hitting anything that moves. These baits fish fast, they're easy to handle, they're easy for the crappies to see, and they're a great way to catch them if they're biting good. So I'll keep catching them on these larger baits all day if I can. It doesn't always happen that way, but when it does, it's really fun. Now the fourth thing that I use these larger profile baits for is attracting fish to me. If I'm stuck in a shack and it's really cold and I'm waiting for crappies to come through, I don't want to be using a little tiny tungsten and plastic to try and attract crappies to my location. I want to use something big, flashy, loud, especially in murky water, that's going to get their attention and bring them to me. And oftentimes I'll have a dead stick in the hole next to me that I can actually have a second chance at some of those more finicky fish that won't hit the bigger bait. Or I'll have a secondary rod rigged up with a tungsten if they don't want to hit that larger bait, but at least it gets them to me. And a rattle bait's great in dark water, stained water, they'll hear that rattle. Flutter spoon is awesome for this in clear water because they'll see that flash and see that bait kind of fluttering down through the water column. That'll bring fish from a long ways away. So those are both great choices for this kind of attracting property. And also glide baits work well because they kind of swim out away from the hole and they can pull fish in from a little farther. So that's the fourth scenario in which I use larger, more aggressive baits for crappies. All right, so now when am I going to switch to my little tungsten and plastic or my tungsten and live bait? Number one is when I've got a mixed bag of fish. If I've got a lot of bluegills and I'm also targeting bluegills, oftentimes they're not going to hit those larger profile baits, and you're much better off with a tungsten and plastic to catch that mixed bag of fish. Or a tungsten and live bait, either one. Scenario number two is just when the crappies are negative. There's just times when they are really finicky, they've been eating bugs, and that's their diet, and they're just not going to chase anything bigger, and you really have to finesse those fish with little twitches and get them to follow it up. And you'll know pretty fast if that's the case, and sometimes that's just the only way to catch them is with something real small and buggy. Now the third scenario is when I'm fishing bigger crappies. I'm not worried about sorting, they're nicer fish, and I'm fishing with those larger baits, but they're just coming up and looking at them and swimming away on some of them, or they're nipping at them. If I'm not worried about sorting, I'll just fish that jig and plastic or jig and live bait because I'm not worried about small fish, and you're going to catch more of those crappies that are in a neutral mode with that smaller profile bait. So that's the third scenario in which I'll kind of downsize and use that smaller profile. And the fourth scenario is when I'm fishing scattered crappies and the fish are real scattered over a basin. They're not really schooling up and I'm just seeing pairs or singles. And I know those fish are not in a competitive mood. And the more fish you have around a bait, the more aggressive they're typically going to be. And if I'm not seeing a lot of fish and I'm dropping every 10 minutes on a fish, I want to make sure I catch that fish. So I'm typically going to drop a tungsten and a plastic on those fish just to make sure that they're going to bite it and I'm not going to miss my opportunity. And typically those fish are not as aggressive anyways. So that's kind of my fourth scenario in which I use those little tungsten and plastics. Now there's a third category that I haven't talked about much yet, and that is vertical spoons. So vertical spoons are kind of what I would consider a hybrid between the larger, more aggressive baits and a small tungsten and plastic or tungsten and live bait. And the reason is crappies oftentimes feed upwards. So when you turn your spoon vertical, they're only seeing the bottom of that spoon. They're not seeing the whole side profile. And it looks like a small offering, but you can fish it really, really fast. So when I'm fishing deep water and I want to get down there quick, or if I want to drop quick through the weeds or whatever, I'll oftentimes use a vertical spoon in those scenarios just because it gives me the opportunity to get more fish quicker, and it's still a pretty finessey presentation. Now really, vertical spoons will catch crappies just about any time, and if you don't know which place to start, you know, small, big, whatever, start with the vertical spoon, and that pretty much is going to catch crappies no matter where they're swimming. So there you go, guys. There is some really good information for you on kind of where to start. And again, I'll leave links in the description below for all this stuff so you can pick it up. But thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe. I got a lot more videos like this and a lot more coming along. So hit that notification bell so you don't miss them. And we'll see you next time. Get hooked up.